Welcome back to the Dargslan Linux series. This is part 10, and today we're stepping into the world every sysadmin lives in: logs and troubleshooting. Linux is famously chatty. It logs almost everything that happens on your system. The real skill isn't generating those logs. It's knowing where to look when something breaks, and just as importantly, knowing what noise to ignore. So here's the roadmap for the next few slides. We'll start by mapping out where Linux actually stores its logs, the two homes you need to know about. Then move into journalctl, which honestly will become your best friend for querying the system journal. After that, we'll walk through the classic text logs in var log, learn how to follow logs live as events happen, dig into kernel messages with dmesg for those tricky hardware problems, and finally tie it all together into a repeatable debugging workflow you can actually use in production. So let's start with the first stop on that roadmap, where Linux actually keeps its logs. On modern systems, you've really got two homes to know about. The system journal is the newer one. It's a binary index database that you query with journalctl, and it captures rich metadata about every event. Then there's the classic var log directory. Plain text files you read with cat, less or tail, perfect for grep and still used by tons of applications. My advice? Start with journalctl and fall back to var log when you need to dig into something it doesn't cover. And since journalctl is where you'll spend most of your time, let's get comfortable with it. On its own, it dumps every log since boot. Useful, but overwhelming, so pipe it through less. Add E to jump straight to the end when you want to know what just happened. Use U to focus on a single service like nginx IPP to filter by severity so you only see errors and worse, and since to bound things in time. Honestly, mix and match those 5 and you'll handle the vast majority of real debugging. And here's where it really clicks. Those flags stack. Want errors from nginx in just the last hour? Combine U, P, and since into one query. Investigating a crash? Journalctl. B jumps to this boot, and B1 takes you to the previous one, which is gold after an unexpected reboot. Add F to any command to livetail new entries as they arrive, and when you want maximum context, xe gives you the end of the log with extra explanations attached. 2 or 3 flags, and you've got a precision instrument. Now, journalctl is powerful, but plenty of systems still write good old plain text logs into var log, and you'll want to know your way around there too. On Debian and Ubuntu, sizelog is the catch-all, while Arhel and Fedora call it messages. auth.log is your first stop for SSH logins and sudo activity. kern.log captures hardware and driver gripes, and dpkg.log tracks every package change. And most apps, nginx, MySQL, Postfix, get their own subdirectory. Cat, less tail, and grep are all you need to read them. Reading logs after the fact is one thing, but often you want to watch errors as they happen. Say, while you're restarting a service and waiting for it to misbehave. For plain text files, tail-f is the classic move. It follows the file and prints new lines the moment they're written. For system services, journalctl uses the same -f flag, and you can pin it to a single unit like nginx. Pipe either one through grep to filter for the word error, and hit Ctrl+C when you're done. Now, journalctl and the system logs cover most of what user space does, but the kernel keeps its own running commentary in something called the ring buffer. And that's what dmesg shows you. Think hardware events, driver messages, USB devices being plugged in, disk errors, network interfaces coming up. I almost always run it with -t for human-readable timestamps and pipe through grep when I'm hunting something specific. -w follows it live, just like tail-f. So next time you plug in a USB drive and nothing seems to happen, dmesg is the first place to look. Here's something you'll bump into the first time you go poking around. var slog. You'll see files like syslog, then syslog 2gz, syslog 3gz, and so on. That's Logrotate doing its job. Every day or so, it shuffles the current log down the line, compresses the older ones with gzip to save space, and eventually deletes the oldest. To read those compressed files, don't bother unzipping. Just use zcat or zless directly. And if your disk is filling up because of the journal itself, journalctl with vacuum size lets you cap it on the spot. Now let's pull all of this together into a workflow you can actually run when something breaks. Start with systemctl status. It tells you if the service is alive, when it last started, and tacks on the most recent log lines. If that's not enough, pull 50 lines of journal for that unit. Still stuck? Widen the net with journalctl to see every error since boot. And if you suspect hardware, a flaky disk, a USB device, a network card, DMESG is where the kernel's been quietly taking notes the whole time. Let's see that workflow in action with 3 situations you'll absolutely run into. First one, you tweaked an nginx config and now it refuses to start. 20 lines of journal for that unit will point you straight at the offending line number. Second, a server rebooted overnight and you have no idea why. Journalctl with -b-1 pulls the previous boot's errors, and the last entries before the cutoff are usually your smoking gun. Third, you plugged in a USB drive and nothing happened. DMSG tells you whether the kernel even noticed it, which instantly splits the problem into a mount issue or a hardware issue. Now, every one of those log entries comes tagged with a priority, numbered 0 through 7, and knowing this scale changes how you hunt for problems. 0 through 2, emerge, alert, and crit, are the genuine fires. Level 3, error, is almost always where you start a debug session. Warnings and notices are worth a glance, but rarely urgent, while info and debug are the fire hose you filter out unless you're really digging. The practical move is passing -p error to journalctl, which instantly hides the noise and shows you everything at error level or worse. Speaking of filtering, let's talk about 3 traps beginners fall into. First, don't try to read every line. Modern systems generate millions of events, so filter aggressively with -p, -u for a service, and time bounds. Second, always check timestamps. An error from last Tuesday isn't what's breaking things right now, so use --since and --until, and remember DMESG-T for readable dates. And third, never edit log files by hand. It breaks rotation and audit trails. If you truly need to clear one, redirect with greater than or use truncate, but honestly, just let Logrotate do its job. So if you remember nothing else from this part, memorize these 5. Journalctl-xe is your go-to when something just broke. It jumps to the end and explains the latest error. Journalctl-u with -f live tails 1 service, perfect while restarting it. -p error --. Since today gives you a quick daily health check. Tail-f on asha var log syslog watches the catch-all stream, and DMSG-T pipe to tail is your first stop whenever hardware acts up. Zooming out, here's the bigger picture from Part 10. Logs live in 2 places, the system journal and the old-school var log files, and journalctl is now your primary lens into both. Use -if when you want to watch things happen live. Reach for DMESG whenever hardware misbehaves, and always start your search narrow before widening out. Filter first, expand only if you have to. And that wraps up Part 10. Up next, we shift from looking inward at logs to looking outward at the network. IP addresses, DNS, ports, and the core tools like IPSS and curl that let you inspect connections from the command line. You're 10 lessons in, with networking and SSH coming up to round out your troubleshooting toolkit. See you in Part 11.